The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Frosty Walker, Chief Information Security Officer at Texas Education Agency, and welcome to another session of Cybersecurity Tips and Tools. Today we'll be covering Senate Bill 820 and House Bill 3834 from the most recent Texas legislation session and their impact and requirements to Texas school districts. This is the first in a series of webinars regarding cybersecurity for the fall semester of 2019. We hope this webinar will be informative. We will allow time at the end of the presentation for question and answers. Should you have a question during the presentation, feel free to submit them and we'll get them queued up for the Q&A session. If someone would drop me a note that they can both see the screen and that the audible is okay, I would appreciate knowing that that's working fine. Very good. Always like to talk just a minute about the Data Security Advisory Committee, the DSAC. Provides guidance to Texas education communities, maximizing collaboration and communication regarding information security issues and cybersecurity resources which can be utilized within the communities served. The DSAC currently is comprised of representatives from school districts, ESCs, TEA, and the private sector. Those that participate are both diverse in size and geographically dispersed across the state and have a willingness to share needs and ideas and a little bit of time every month, hopefully to provide solutions for everyday cybersecurity issues within the educational community. The DSAC is now open to anyone that would like to participate. So if you would like to participate in that, you can drop me a line afterwards and we'll get you signed up for that. A recording of today's webinar will be posted on our Texas Gateway portal under Cybersecurity Tips and Tools. That can be located at https://www.texas.gateway.org under Cybersecurity Tips and Tools. If you browse to that portal, you will see featured resources in the middle of the page, and you will see a folder called Cybersecurity Data, Cybersecurity Tips and Tools. We have all of our webinars that have been previously broadcast in that folder, along with lots of other resources regarding cybersecurity. So we have a list of where you may be able to obtain free cybersecurity training. We have we have some examples of cybersecurity exercises that you could do within your organization. So there's a lot of different resources out there. And we also have information regarding the Texas Cybersecurity Framework. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But today we're going to talk primarily about the things that are inside of Senate Bill 820. And the first thing, Senate Bill 820 is an amendment to Texas Education Code. And so in its definitions, there are three key definitions that they emphasize in this legislative statute. Number one, breach of system security means an incident in which a student information that is sensitive, protected, confidential, as provided by state or federal law, is stolen, copied, transmitted, viewed, or used by a person unauthorized to engage in that action. So, a breach of system security for the Texas Education Code deals with just the potential exposure of student information. Now, we also have a Texas Business Code that talks about other types of potential exposure of sensitive information. But for Texas education and what we're dealing with today, we're talking about specifically breach of information regarding student information. The second definition, cyber attack, an attempt to damage or disrupt or gain unauthorized access to a computer network, computer system. And cybersecurity means the measures taken to protect a computer and our computer network, computer system against unauthorized use or access. So one of the requirements for school districts, it says each school district shall adopt a cybersecurity policy to, number one, secure district cybersecurity infrastructure against cyber attacks and other cybersecurity incidents. Number two, determine cybersecurity risk and implement mitigation planning. So we have basically, we have to adopt some type of a plan, a cybersecurity plan that will protect against cybersecurity attacks and incidents, but also determine cybersecurity risk and implement mitigation planning. It also states school district cybersecurity plan may not conflict with the information security standards for institutions of higher education adopted by the Department of Information Resources under chapters 2054 and 2059 of the Government Code. Now that specific reference is into what we commonly call Texas Cybersecurity Framework. Not only are higher education agencies required to utilize this, but so are Texas agencies as well. So I thought I would spend just a little bit of time talking a little bit about frameworks, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Texas Cybersecurity Framework, so you get an idea of what that compromises, because it implies like cybersecurity policy. Is that similar to like an acceptable use policy? Well, not exactly. Acceptable use policy would be something that falls under this larger cybersecurity policy or a framework. Most frameworks that we see out today are based on the 5 Nist functions, Nist being the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. And the frameworks identify 5 specific, 5 general functions. Number one, identify. So we're going to have to, in a framework, we're going to have to identify some things, such as the things that we might want to protect. Second function is protect. So how are we protecting those resources that we have? And then what are we doing to detect should we have an incident? And if that incident, and we investigate an incident or an event, and we realize that it is indeed an incident, we have to be able to respond to that. And then the last function is, how do we recover from an event? How do we recover from an incident? So those are the 5 functions that almost any framework is based under. Nist has a very good framework. It's a little more complicated than the Texas Cybersecurity Framework, but it's generally the same concepts. Just a little, Texas Cybersecurity Framework was condensed a little bit. So I'm going to give some examples of how we might work with that. This Texas Cybersecurity Framework is a self-assessment. It is developed in a spreadsheet. There are actually 40 objectives. We're going to take a look at a couple, and we're going to talk about how we could potentially use that. Because a lot of times people talk to me about this cybersecurity framework and they say, well, it's going to take us a lot of time. When you actually do the risk assessment itself, it doesn't take so much time. as it is once you've realized the gaps that you have, how you fill in those gaps. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. Under identify, the first two functions, objectives under that is privacy and confidentiality. So we are going to identify what we're actually trying to protect. And we're going to rate those in a level in which we think that our organization is our posture of where we're at in that. Level 0 is non-existent. There's no evidence of us addressing this objective. Level 1 is the organization has an ad hoc, inconsistent, reactive approach to meeting the objective. Level 2 is it's repetitive. Now, the organization is consistent with an overall approach to meeting the objective, but still mostly reactive and undocumented. The organization does not routinely measure or enforce policy compliance. So in many cases, when we look at what were these objectives, we're probably going to look and say, well, we may be in a level 2, or we could be in a level 3. So a level 3 says we actually have a documented, detailed approach to meet that objective, as well as regularly measuring its compliance. So as you work through a framework and you do this on a regular basis, are you actually measuring and enforcing policy compliance? And the answer to that, I believe, is yes, you are. So regularly, if you go through a framework on a regular basis, whether that's once a year, once a semester, however you choose to do that, you're measuring that on a regular basis. Level 4 is managed. The organization uses established risk management framework to measure and evaluate risk and integrate improvements, provide the recommendations to applicable regulations. And level 5 is optimize. The organization has refined its standards and practices, focusing on a way to improve its capabilities to be the most efficient and also cost-effective manner. So those are the 5 different levels that we could rate our organization in. You see at the top of that spreadsheet, there's 0, 1 through 5. In this example, under privacy and identity, I have given a score as an example of 100%. So each objective is going to equal 100%, but we can spread that across multiple levels that we think we are, because in most cases, we may have some legacy applications or something that's a little bit behind compared to where we are with everything else. So you're allowed to do that. So in this case, I said we're 100% a level 1. So we're ad hoc and we're inconsistent in meeting that. For data classification, I've given ourselves a rating of a 25 and a 1 and a 75 and a 2. So we have a majority of our processes. We have a good approach in doing those, but it's still not documented. So those are the ways that we would score something in this self-assessment. And in the Texas Cybersecurity Framework that we provide out on the Texas Gateway, we also have a roadmap, and that roadmap is going to talk to us about what we actually need to be doing to get to a level 3, where we're documenting. We often refer to level 3 for government entities as our due diligence. So under privacy and confidentiality, we want to ensure appropriate security of retained information and improve sharing under defined conditions that are required for safeguards and assurance. We want to check for appropriate identity management or onboarding and offboarding processes based on the principle of least privilege resistance. I, as a user, Frosty, do not need administrative rights for everything. I just need to have those permissions to do my function as what I need to do. So we don't want to overreach, extend privileges that someone doesn't necessarily need when we do that. We're going to adhere to data protection requirements of FERPA, Texas Business Code, Commerce Code, and Education Code, as well as any organization can define their own privacy policies. The organization should have a documented, detailed approach to meeting the objectively and measure it for compliance. And it should evaluate risk and integrate improvements beyond the requirements of applicable recommendations for a regular basis. And you're going to see these last two almost in everything that we recommend. We always like to see that we're trying to provide requirements that are beyond what regulations are. So I really don't want to put my money in a bank that meets minimum requirements. And I don't see many banks going, hey, I meet minimum requirements. They provide additional protection to try to attract you so that you are willing to place your money in that bank. And the same thing is true with what we want to do with the resources that are entrusted to us by the citizens of Texas. We want to try to improve them beyond the requirements of regulation. Data classification. We want to make sure that we have a data classification policy that clearly defines classification. Data owners that should consult with ITS and legal counsel regarding data classification and information not governed by federal, state, local requirements, such as FERPA, Texas Business Code, Texas Education Code. And you want to review data and its classification on a regular basis to ensure compliance. Again, what is a regular basis? Well, you can set that regular basis on a year or whatever you choose to do that. And again, here's those last two. We should have documented, detailed approach to meeting the objective and regularly measure it for compliance, and should evaluate risk and integrate improvements beyond requirements of regulation. So we worked through those two for identity. I'm going to work through a couple more, and we're going to work through these a little quicker now that you may have some concept of how we do that. Under protect, I chose a couple here that we can talk about today. Security awareness training. We're going to talk more about that when we talk about House Bill 3834. We now have a requirement to provide security awareness training to all of our employees. So I went ahead and put 100% in a level 4. And level 4, again, it's established with risk management. We measure it. We evaluate the risk beyond requirements of applicable regulations. Another objective for Protect is access control. Who gets access to what? In this case, I have scored us at 75% at a level 3, so most of our processes are documented, but we still have some processes that we don't have documented, so I've rated those at a level 2. So now let's take a quick look at what it would take on the roadmap in both of those. Security awareness and training. Establish a security awareness policy. We're going to define and prepare, deliver, facilitate ongoing security awareness, utilizing a wide variety of medium and delivery mechanisms to educate the organization for security-related information and threats based on the roles performed in their organization. So once again, even though in House Bill 3834, we're going to talk about everybody has to have training, we could go beyond that and train people with some additional training. That could be instructor-led. That could be a PowerPoint presentation on their specific roles. For example, you may want to do that with your administrative team, with your IT team, where they may have more privileged access. You may want to provide a little additional training on how to protect those privileged rights that they have. You also want to ensure that every employee, contractor, intern, and affiliate is aware of your organization's approach and policies to protecting the assets. And then, of course, we have those two about documented, detailed approach to meeting the objective and evaluate risk and integrate improvements. Access control. We're going to establish processes to ensure access to applications, servers, databases, and network devices in our environment that is limited to authorized personnel based on least privileges through documented onboarding processes. Well, also within our applications, we may want to establish session limits, lockout features for failed login attempts, auto screen locking features, establish account expirations, disable unused accounts in a timely manner. And again, we're going to document and have a detailed approach to meeting this objective, as well as we'll evaluate risk and integrate improvements. Let's take a quick look at two from the detect. So I just picked a couple that were together. They're actually objective number 35 and 36, vulnerability assessment. Vulnerability assessment, we'll talk a little more about that in a minute when we get to the roadmap. I've given us a 1 at that level, but in most cases that's not really the true posture that we have, because we can also classify patch management in vulnerability assessment. So if we have a good solid patch management and we're patching our Windows machines and all of our machines in a timely manner, then we'll want to split that into 2 different levels potentially. Now, also under detect is malware protection. And again, most of us have a pretty good managed framework on how we're going to protect our endpoints, how we have potentially firewalls, we have different things at different levels in place. So our malware protection may indeed be one of the higher scoring within this. So let's take a look at what it would take from the roadmap. So vulnerability, it talks about establishing a documented vulnerability assessment management program. We're going to assess that program to include regular assessments and monitor for vulnerability detection and remediation, including patch management processes, configuration management on our systems and databases and application security vulnerabilities. And we're going to test and evaluate the security controls and defenses that we have in place to ensure that the required security posture levels are met. We'll establish a tracking process to measure the effectiveness of the program. Are we able to remediate vulnerabilities? Are we able to how successful are we in pushing patches to a majority of our workstations? Those are ways that we could potentially track and measure the effectiveness of this program. We also want to perform or facilitate ongoing or periodic penetration testing on security defenses. Most of us do not have tools to do what they call a penetration test. That may require an outside third party. Some of the ESCs provide that as a service to the schools, but I think that I recommend at least having 1 penetration test a year, just so that you know that everything that you're doing is working to protect the assets that you have. And once you've remediated those issues that you found, you want to go back and retest those just to make sure that the mitigation that you put in place worked as you anticipated it to. And again, we're going to have at least have to have a document detailed approach to meeting the objective. Malware protection. Well, yes, we're going to have to establish a malicious code policy to reflect the management intent to protect, detect, and clean up malicious code in our environment. Protection is accomplished in various levels, including the host, the network, the gateway, as well as the endpoint, our workstations. Protection mechanisms must be updated periodically and frequently to address evolving threats and monitored. And we see that most of our antivirus may be updated on a weekly or a daily basis, but we want those periodically updated so we include new threats as they're developed. And again, we're going to want to have a documented, detailed approach, and we're going to evaluate for risk and integrate improvements beyond the requirements of applicable regulations. So now we've gone through 3 of the areas. We're going to quickly talk about respond. So under respond, we have a couple of categories here called cybersecurity incident response and privacy incident response. And a lot of people say, oh, what's the difference? Well, a cybersecurity incident happens frequently. Should a computer get infected with malware, and we're either able to respond and clean that automatically with an antivirus tool, or we might have to re-image that machine because our tools couldn't clean it, but that would be a cybersecurity incident and a response to that. In this case, I've rated this sample at a 100 and a 2. Again, a 2 is that we really don't have, it's more reactive and it's undocumented, and we're not measuring that. A privacy incident is a cybersecurity incident, or it doesn't have to be cybersecurity. It could be hard copy related, in which we have potential exposure to what we have determined is sensitive information. So it could be that someone inadvertently threw a bunch of hard copy in a dumpster, and somebody found that. That would be a privacy incident response, and how would we respond to that? Or it could be a cybersecurity attack in which we have detected that, and now we're working through our incidents and we respond to that. So in this case, for a sample, again, I've rated us at a level 2 for that. Let's take a quick look at our roadmaps for these 2 items. A cybersecurity incident, the number one thing, you have to have an incident response policy, a program capable of handling capacity for information securities, including protection, detection, analysis, containment, recovery, and response activities. A response program is used to track, document, and report incidents to the appropriate officials and authorities. The Department of Information Resources has developed an incident response team Redbook. It's available on their site as well as on our Texas Gateway portal. And that is an excellent guide for an incident response program. It has all of the state statutes that talk about sensitive information. On page 12, it has a triage of what you need to be doing when you determine that you do have a cybersecurity incident. So that guide actually talks about the different triages that you need to perform and what you need to do. There is an escalation alert of who we need to report this incident to. That's a template that you can have and you just add the names and phone numbers of when and who you need to contact in there. as well as if it becomes a privacy event and we do have to notify someone, there's examples of the notification and all the process that you need to go through in the notification process. Who you can contact for if you're going to look for some type of providing some type of cybersecurity monitoring, for example, in a privacy incident. So I think that's a very good resource, and I recommend that if you don't have an incident response documented program, you take a look at that. It should also include the ability to implement changes to take advantage of the lessons we learn. Every time we have an incident, we learn something new. The same thing is true every time, and I strongly recommend you doing tabletop exercises on cybersecurity, just like you do disaster recovery. And every time you do a tabletop exercise, two things happen. Number one, you're going to find gaps that you may have missed before, and number two, you get more familiar with what you need to do in that instance should you have an actual event, an incident, and you're responding to that. So you become more comfortable in what needs to be done. So let's take a look at the roadmap for the privacy incident responses. A privacy incident response involves the management of events and issues, inquiries and incidents around detected or are reported to include all phases from an investigation to a resolution. Incidents could include, but not limited to, privacy breach, loss, theft, unauthorized access, malware infections, occurrences of negligence, human error, and malicious acts. You establish and document responsibility for notifying and escalating events to the appropriate personnel and coordinate activities to ensure timely isolation and containment, impact analysis, and any resulting remediation or resolution requirements. And again, here's our two, that we document the detailed approach to meet that objective, and we evaluate risk and integrate improvements. We're almost through with talking about the with a framework. Again, these are specifically from the Texas Cybersecurity Framework, but almost any framework that you choose is going to have objectives similar to this. The last function that we have within the Nist functions is recovery, and there's only one objective, and that is recovery. You need to be able to recover. Many of us have disaster recovery plans that are documented, and we may do tabletop exercises. So in this case, for our organization, in the sample that we're using here, I have set it at a level 3. But we also need to do those same tabletop exercises for cybersecurity. So we need to think about different types of cybersecurity exercises. And again, we have some of those out on the Texas Gateway portal that you can use. We also want to include what would happen if you had ransomware. Those are things that are a big threat to local government school districts today. So we want to make sure that we actually practice those so we understand what we need to do in those types of situations. The roadmap includes, under disaster recovery, we establish a backup and disaster recovery policy and program to maximize efforts to protect our resources from a disaster. Utilizing the identification and prioritization of the organization's information assets. So within your disaster recovery, if you had, for example, a major disaster in which you had a fire in your data center and you had to rebuild a data center somewhere else, what applications do you need to bring up first? So you need to have a list of prioritizations. Managing the recovery data and applications in the event of a loss or damage. That includes natural disasters, disk errors, system failures, unintentional or intentional human acts, data entry errors, as well as system operation errors. And I recommend performing tabletop and disaster recovery exercises. You can start that off in IT, but I also recommend that you have exercises that includes all of your major divisions of personnel. You want to perform regular backup restoration testing to validate your backups and your restoration process. And again, we're going to document, make sure a detailed approach to meet the objective and evaluate risk and integrate improvements beyond the requirements of applicable regulations. So with that, we have now covered 9 of the 40 objectives within the Texas Cybersecurity Framework. And when you finish all 40 of those, we have it set up so that it builds a graphic like the sample that we see here. Excuse me. So you will see a red line that's drawn down 3.0, and we're saying that is our due diligence. And now when we talk about Senate Bill 820, if you'll recall, it talked about identifying our risk. Well, with this graphic, it makes it pretty easy to identify risk. The way I look at that is anything that's to the right of the red line is a success story. Anything that's to the left of the line is a risk. And the further left it is, the lower number, then that's potentially the higher risk. And maybe we need to look at how we address that. And most of the time, when I work with someone with their framework, the lower scores that we have are really in the identify in the top part of the framework. It's having those processes and identifying what we need to do that. So there is so that makes it easier for us to identify risk. And then again, part of Senate Bill 820 says we have to have a mitigation plan. Now, that mitigation plan in cybersecurity is not going to happen over the weekend. It's not going to happen over the next semester. It's not going to happen in the next year. We can't remediate all of our risk at one time. That unless the school districts somehow inherited a large grant to do so. So you can build a mitigation plan based on those lower risk areas that you need to address, and then you can look at all of those, and you look at those over a 3-year or a 5-year plan, but you have a mitigation based on the graph that you're looking at. So we're going to get back now to more of the things that are requirements and the impact of Senate Bill 820 for the school districts. Superintendents in each school district shall designate a cybersecurity coordinator to serve as a liaison between the district and the agency. In this case, that's TEA. And the district cybersecurity coordinator shall report to the agency, TEA, any cyber attack or cybersecurity incident against the district that constitutes a breach of system security. Remember back in our definitions, breach of system security involves student information that was sensitive, protected, or confidential. You would be required to report that to TEA. So we'll talk a little bit about how you are going to report that in just a minute. Let's take a look at the last function that Senate Bill 820 defines the district. And it says the district coordinator, a cybersecurity coordinator shall provide a notice to a parent or person standing in parental relationship to a student enrolled in the district of an attack or incident in which the report was required under the previous section involving students' sensitive information. Now, if we have to notify parents, the cybersecurity coordinator can coordinate that, but it takes the effort of administration for the schools, potentially school board, as well as legal. So, the cybersecurity coordinator can be the coordinator of that, but that responsibility is going to fall across multiple divisions within your own organization to actually to meet those requirements. So let's talk a little bit about how a school district, number one, because the cybersecurity coordinator is going to have to work with TEA, we need to know who that person is. So we are going to collect that information in the application Ask TED. And the role of cybersecurity coordinator will be added to the application where a superintendent or their designee will be able to sign in and designate the individual in the role. And we actually will show you that in just a moment. Right now, this is scheduled to be moved into production over the weekend. Unless something comes up over the next few days, you will be able to go in and your designee or your superintendent will be able to add that role in Ask TED, and we're actually going to show you a video of how someone would do that. Also, we get asked, how is a school district cybersecurity going to coordinate report incidents to TEA? Well, we've set up a special email to receive those incident reports. cybersecurity@tea.texas.gov. Cybersecurity, all one word, at tea.texas.gov. Now, you say, well, what all do I need to let you know when I send that email? Well, really, you just need to let us know that you're having an issue and leave us a phone number. We'll call you back. We'll see if we can't provide assistance, depending on what level of security incident that is. We may be able to provide support. You may need to have forensics teams come in. We can refer you to the Department of Information Resources that has those types of teams under contract and can get them out to work with you. We'll also notify your ESC and your regional folks to let them know that has happened as well. The most important thing is that we want to make sure that you have a plan to recover your data if you've lost data or recover from this incident. So we're not really going to collect a lot of information up front. We'll do that as we work with you throughout the incident to collect enough information that we can develop a report for the legislation in an aggregate form. So that is how the school districts were going to let us know who their cybersecurity coordinator is, and that's how you can let us know if you think you have an incident. So I do have a quick, less than a minute video that will walk you through. So you log on to Ask TED. And we're going to go to the district personnel button. And we see a list of all the different people that are being defined here. So we can look down through here and we do not see that a cybersecurity coordinator has been added. So we click the add button, add personnel in the lower left corner. Now we start filling that out. We go to the drop down in the middle. We choose Cybersecurity Coordinator. We're going to input a phone number and a fax number and an email address. We're going to use the district that's already, the address that's already set up for the district. We're going to save that. And now we can go back to personnel. And now we can look to see under cybersecurity if indeed that has been added Do I need to edit that in any way? So it's fairly simple to add that within Texas, within ASTET. So now we're going to talk a little bit about House Bill 3834. And House Bill 3834 is an amendment to the Texas Government Code. And that bill starts out stating that that we're going to have a state certified security training program. DIR, in consultation with the Cybersecurity Council, is going to establish, that was established in a previous session, DIR is going to annually certify at least 5 cybersecurity programs for state and local government employees. DIR has not certified anyone yet. They think they will have probably a very large number of certified cybersecurity training programs by the end of October. But right now, we don't have any that have been certified by DIR. Let's take a look under definition. Government Code. Title 10. Local government means a county, a municipality, a special district, a school district, a junior college district, or other political subdivision within the state. So, by definition, school districts are impacted by House Bill 3834. So, cybersecurity training requirements. At least once a year, a local government shall identify local employees who have access to government computer systems, databases, and require those employees and elected officials of the local government to complete cybersecurity training program that was certified in the above section. The governing body of local government shall select the most appropriate cybersecurity training program certified by DIR for employees of that local government to complete. The governing body shall also verify and report on completion of the cybersecurity training program by the employees to the department. In this case, because it is the government code, it is the Department of Information Resources. How are we going to report that to the Department of Information Resources? They're working on that. But first, they're working on getting certification of security awareness programs. In addition, there are required periodic audits to ensure compliance of this section. So, what we do know is there's also a stipulation that if someone has developed their own cybersecurity awareness program, that potentially that could be certified as a certified program. It'd be submitted to DIR. There are some stipulations about that, however, so we're going to wait to see what DIR certifies. Is there a cost associated with all of those? There may be, hopefully, because we're dealing with such a large universe of users under local government, county, municipalities, school districts. Hopefully we'll be able to get that cost down to a very minimum that impacts the school districts. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to questions, which we have received quite a few questions during the process. I'll work back up to the top. So someone asked, what's the difference between TAC 202 and the Texas Cyber Security Framework? TAC 202 is Texas Administrative Code that applies only to agencies and higher education. The Texas Framework is separate. under a separate statute that it talks about, that's also applicable to higher education and state agencies. One of the things I didn't talk about the cybersecurity framework is all of the regions have been submitting their Texas cybersecurity framework for the last 6 years. That's what we've been doing as well at TEA. And the advantage that we have that we're using the same framework over a long period of time is part of that Texas cybersecurity framework that's on a spreadsheet. We have a separate tab that allows you to track every time that you go through and take a snapshot, do that self-risk assessment, and so you can track that. And over a long period of time, over 4 years, in our case, we can now see that over 6 years, we can see how much we've improved our security posture based on those 40 objectives in the framework over a long period of time. And that really helps someone figure out where their security posture is today. So where do I get that spreadsheet that has the roadmap? Well, it's under the Texas Gateway, texasgateway.org, under cybersecurity tips and tools. You'll find it marked there under the Texas cybersecurity framework. This presentation is being recorded. Also, the slides will also be posted again under the texasgateway.org under cybersecurity tips and tools. So we are going to share the PowerPoints as well. I actually tried to, so here's a question about the cybersecurity policy that TASB is writing for the districts. I tried to reach out to TASB today and wasn't able to get a hold of my contact before the presentation. I know they're working on something. I believe I'm scheduled to present at some of their meetings that they're going to have later on in the year. So I'm not sure what all that cybersecurity policy is going to be for those memberships, but I know that that's scheduled to come out in October. So again, the Texas cybersecurity framework is a self-assessment that has those cybersecurity objectives. All of those tabs that you saw examples of today are in that cybersecurity document that's in the Texas Gateway portal. At the end, I'll go back and post that. I'll show you that website here again in just a minute. Where is the URL for the Redbook? Well, the Redbook is available out on the Gateway portal. It's also available in one of those slides at DIR's website as well. So the question is, will TEA require independent school districts to adhere to the Texas cybersecurity framework? No. We will not require schools to do that. You can choose other frameworks. It's just that 820 does say it can't conflict with the Texas cybersecurity framework, which again is based on Nist. So school districts can choose frameworks that are primarily based on Nist. Again, you can do that. As an agency, we're most familiar with the Texas cybersecurity framework, as well as your regional service centers as well. The two that I'm most familiar with is the one that's at Nist. There are some school districts I know of that have said they're going to work through the Nist. I think that's a great framework as well. It has a few more objectives, like rather than 40, there are more in there than that. But if you feel more comfortable working with that, I certainly encourage you to do that. This is a very good question. So, is there any way to mask your email address to prevent them from being crawled online and added to mass email resources? So actually, we don't. No, we collect everybody that registers for an email. We don't put that out anywhere. We don't put that out. We will also put out questions and answers for this session. We block off the names and the email addresses for that because we do want to make sure we try not to have any of our emails get crawled, and so the best way is to keep them from being crawled is not to put them out there. I know I have my email out in several locations, but that is a good question. I will do some additional research on that question to see if we can come up with an answer on that. Okay. Do we report every single cybersecurity incident? No. Senate Bill 820 only requires you to report that involves student information. But if you have a situation that you need assistance with, do not hesitate to drop us an email at cybersecurity@tea.texas.gov, and we'll see if we can't provide additional directions in which you may need to get resources. Cybersecurity for a district, does it have to be an employer? Can it be a consultant hired for the role? Bill does not stipulate either way. So I would leave that is up to you. As an independent school district, you can choose an employee. You could potentially hire someone. You could form a consortium with different school around you, different ISDs around you to share in that cost as well. Is 3834 an unfunded funded mandate? It is. Unfortunately, it is. Because of the ransomware, they felt like that we needed to address security awareness as a whole across as many entities as they could. They tried to put a number of funding on that, and the LBB just came back and said it was too hard to determine what that cost would be. So it is an unfunded mandate. Says we have hundreds of employees who only use a district computer or an email account once or twice a year, and they may not speak English. I don't know if any of the certification have multiple languages for that. Again, it only takes one click to introduce malware or ransomware into your environment. So I think that it says all employees. Let's see. Hold on just a moment. I lost my place. I apologize. So is their funding approved to purchase the DIR approved? And at this time there was not. How does the state define local a local computer system or database? I would think that if there's a computer that's connected to the internet or to your network, that would be a computer system or a database. Are there any computer systems, or only if they're considered critical? It says computer system. It doesn't say anything in the law about critical systems and access to confidential information. It says all employees. Yeah. Do we have an updated sample template of the guides through writing the policy to secure the? Yes. We'll provide that. So in what we were showing, all 40 of those have the roadmap as well as samples within that, and builds the ground. Okay, it says our district just completed a district-wide risk assessment based on CIS controls. I'll take that offline with this school district. I'll have to do some more research on that. Okay. Is there a list of sensitive or protected information or confidential? There is. We will publish that out on the Texas Gateway portal, both what's considered under FERPA and state law. It looks like we're just about running out of time, and I haven't gotten through all these questions yet. So we'll have to finish up these questions. I have one here that says, is there any financial consequences for us not being compliant with Senate Bill 820? At this time, there is not. The same thing is true with House Bill 3834. Is there any financial consequences? At this time, there is not. That is, I said, well, another question, who's responsible for doing the audits? It doesn't say in the bill who is doing that. I would think that DIR might request an audit of that from time to time. It doesn't say who is responsible for that. Okay. With that, we're going to have to answer the rest of these questions online, but we had lots of great questions today. I really appreciate everybody that's attended. I hope you find this information informative. We'll get all of these answers to the questions out. We'll get the presentations up on the Gateway. Let me pull up that where that is again for those folks that are still here. We've still got a lot that are here, so thank y'all very much. There it is. There's the URL for the cybersecurity gateway tips and tools under www.texasgateway.org. So you'll find a lot of those resources. So we'll publish those. Hopefully we can get those up by the end of the week. The questions and answers may take us a little longer, but we'll get all those out there as well. Thank you very much for your attendance today. If you need anything, you can always drop me a line, and appreciate y'all's attendance. Thank you very much. Have a great day.